Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Houseless. My name is Peter Agasta. I'm the host of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got an incredible episode. Today is our 70th show, our 70th episode, and we're ringing it in with none other than the great singer, New Yorker, Shilpa Ray. On the show today, Shilpa's going to be playing at Union Pool here in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York, on February 3rd with the Dreebs and Shark Muffin. Check it out. Please be there at the 8 o'clock door. You can get tickets at union-pool.com. Also, on Valentine's Day, which is February 14th, I had to think about that for a sec, Shilpa is also doing a very important and special Planned Parenthood benefit with none other than Jonathan Toobin, who was on a previous episode of The Houseless. In fact, it was episode 36. So this is 70. Go back to 36 and hear Jonathan's conversation, which was a great one. And Shilpa's playing, along with a few other artists that I work with, Bush Tetras to be one, and Kendra Morris, all playing at Music Hall of Williamsburg, February 14th, also in Brooklyn, New York, for Planned Parenthood, kind of curated by DJ Jonathan Tobin. So, again, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you so much. It's called The House List. Every episode is edited and engineered by CJ Stewart. My name is Peter Agostin. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, also SoundCloud, / The Houseless Podcast is where you can find it on SoundCloud. If you happen to have an account, even if you have 1 or 0 followers, I don't care, or many, many more, please repost the conversation. This was a really great one. Shilpa and I have been working together on a bunch of shows this past year. She put out an incredible album called Door Girl on the Northern Spy imprint, which you can now stream anywhere where you stream any music, and highly advise it. If you have a chance to see her play live, please do. She's great. She's an amazing singer, talented piano player, harmonium player, and she's got a cool story, and she's got a kind of like, we riff, and it was really fun. I think in some ways we have a lot in common, both first generation kids, child of immigrant parents, and we kind of get into that, and amongst a lot of stuff. She's a New York City underground music kind of OG at this point in time, and I thought it was great. And I think if you're a fan of her music, you're definitely in for a big treat. If you've never heard her stuff before, then I think you're really going to dig this, and hopefully it'll open up some interest to check out some of her previous works, especially Door Girl, the most recent thing. But she put out a few other albums. 2015, she did a great one called Last Year's Savage, also on Northern Spy, and has a long-running, kind of affiliation with Nick Cave, who helped put out another record of hers a few years back, too. So do a little research, get on there, figure it out, and find some stuff, and let us proceed with this amazing conversation. Me and Shilpa Ray, only here on the Houseless Podcast. Thank you guys so much. Check it out, y'all. Enjoy. Now I have sort of like a sense of your history, kind of like releasing records, and what your history here in, I guess, in New York City is, because I identify it with the records, as far as like the years are sort of like a benchmark. But I would love to kind of get a better idea of like how you even kind of like fell into this or got here, because even in this past year too, like we've obviously done we've done a bunch of shows together, and it's like been a pretty busy like year, and it leading into this year or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
But so when did you actually like move here to New York? You remember?
I was on an internship in 2000. And I was a junior account exec at a business-to-business PR firm.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was very. It was interesting because it was not what I wanted to do. I was getting a business degree basically for my parents because they didn't believe in art school. And I had an opportunity to work in New York, so I took it because I was going to school in Philadelphia, and I didn't really like it there.
Were you going to art school in Philadelphia?
Oh, no. I was going to Drexel. I was going to a tech school.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, there's no such thing as art school in my household, even though my mom was originally a painter before she got her arranged marriage.
Oh, but you had no leverage to try to sell the art school angle at all?
Not at all. No, you don't. You just don't go to art school in my family. You have to do something that's going to eventually make you six figures. And I wasn't cut out for any of it. And when you can't be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer because you don't have the grades to pull that, you end up studying business and majoring in marketing because that's where you can go.
So did you try? Did you ever have an aspiration of doing the doctor lawyer thing? Was that
I think I said something when I was 5 because I knew it would make my dad happy.
Right.
Because he wanted a doctor in the family. And I was like, I'll do it. I'll be the doctor. There's no way. I was a very spacey kid. I was very tough to discipline, too, because I just kind of did whatever I wanted, even though, I grew up in a very strict household.
So you grew up in Jersey, right?
I grew up in Jersey.
So what town again?
I grew up in Hamilton, New Jersey, is where I went to school. I went to high school around Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay.
But I also spent very early childhood in Union City. That's where I guess our family started. Even though when my dad immigrated, he immigrated to Queens. Was his first place that he lived.
So do you know what year he came to the States?
71.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Interesting.
Yeah, he was one of the hires. A lot of people now ask me if my parents are refugees because it's a very popular question for brown people. But no, during that time period, they were getting a lot of people from places like India and China to come in and fill office jobs for people who were missing going to war. There were so many men out.
Right.
In the Vietnam War, they needed people to work those jobs, and that's why they were bringing, my father's generation over.
Right. So, what do you know? What his first job here was?
He worked at a chemical company. I cannot remember the name of it.
In New York City.
Mm-hmm. He was originally an electrical engineer, but I guess you can engineer lots of stuff. So he went into chemical engineering too, and then eventually went into computers, like everyone did in the 80s. Right. And, he's a self-made man. He was one of the hardest, toughest people I've ever come across. I don't think anyone is as hard as my dad. Yeah? I've never met a man as hard as my father,
I think, because obviously there's maybe our upbringings, they're not that different, but there's definitely obviously some similarities and some differences. But, my parents came here in 1969 from Hungary. So, and when you say that about your dad, it's like I definitely have a similar view of my dad, too. But he was a mechanic and had a garage, foreign car mechanic for 30 years. And, but he worked basically 7 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
And you come home and so basically it was me, I had a brother, and then my dad and my mom. But my mom had basically 2 jobs, so she worked at a printing press and then did all the books for my dad's garage, basically. And yet somehow was able to feed us every meal too, which is kind of
it's true. Amazing. That is the experience.
Is it similar? So that was kind of a similar thing?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you think about it, they sacrificed so much and left everything to come to this crazy country. And when you stick out too on top of it, because I'm not white, so it's that on top of it, and people making fun of them for not speaking English really well. Right. That was a huge problem. And I mean, the last thing they'd ever want their kids to do is go to art school and blow it, you know?
Yeah. That, I think maybe we have that in common, too.
That was the mentality. It's like, you're going to do what? You want to be a filmmaker? What is wrong with you, you know? You have to do something that's going to make me proud. So I know you're going to be able to buy that, you know, 6-bedroom house in, you know, Connecticut or whatever the American dream was in their minds. And that's what they were pushing for, because they did not want to be told or face the fact that coming here was kind of a bullshit idea in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, I mean, do you think, like, well, okay. So, I mean, there's, because you can look at that a lot of different ways, too. Like, I want to, like it, say, if they didn't, and then you were born in India, then what would your life be like too? It would be very different, right? I mean, obviously, then the options would be much even smaller than they are here. I think that's a fair assessment.
It depends how you look at it, because a lot of it's about class too. I mean, people look at India as like this you know, cesspool of misogyny. In a lot of ways, it is. In a lot of ways, it isn't. You know, it really, there's a billion people. Right. So you could be part of any circle. It's just so much stuff going on at once.
Did you guys go back when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah,
so you went back like every summer or something? Or?
Yeah, and I actually really enjoyed it. A lot of kids I know that went back didn't like it so much because you don't get all the first world sort of, you know, accommodation. But I loved it because I had cousins. I had people around me that looked like me. So all of a sudden, I was part of a society, part of a culture. Yeah. I think if I did grow up there, I would just have been very normal. I could picture myself, you know, adjusting to things a lot better.
Because I've never had the pleasure of traveling in that country. So my frame of reference is kind of small, though I have a bunch of friends and some friends that I grew up with that their parents came to the States and that they would go back, and I did the same thing, going back to Hungary every year with my mom when I was a kid, and so it's a similar experience. But so where was your family based at when you would go back? What city or town?
Mumbai and Calcutta. Right. So my dad's family based themselves in Mumbai, and my mom's side of the family was from Calcutta, but they're from this regionally. They're from the same, so they speak the same dialect. Okay, yeah. And it's a really hard country to pigeonhole into anything. Right. Some people go there and they're like, it's anarchy, and it kind of is. I mean, could you imagine managing 1 billion people? That's just in a very condensed space. Right. People have wide ranges of beliefs. You would have to be very philosophical to live there, almost to the point of being existential. I mean, you have to share a space with so many, and there's so little space to share. So yeah, your attitude towards things are just different, you know? Yeah. Attitude towards work and poverty is very different, too.
What's your family like there? Like, you're still close with them?
For the most part, I love my cousins on my mom's side of the family. Yeah. I'm closer to my mom's side than my dad's. I just think they turned out great, you know? They're just cool, and they're very forgiving, and things that I would think wouldn't be good in their eyes or I'd be judged for, they just don't care. They're just happy that I'm there. Mm-hmm. And I like that easiness with them. As far as my parents' generation goes, I mean, my aunts, my uncles, I think there was that judgmental thing of my parents' generation. Right. I think a lot of that goes universally to people who were born and raised and are American for many generations. Is there's just something kind of weird about our parents' generation. They have a lot of rules and a lot of like social upkeep that I don't think a lot of us adhere to. So. No,
I completely agree with that. And then, but I also think, to their credit, I guess, if you would, they know struggles that perhaps we didn't have to necessarily endure, you know. And
that's so true, yeah.
Which probably later informs this kind of like, unaccepting impatience that comes with like artists, young American artists. I don't know, but I think it's just like a family by family type of thing too. So then, because I think we were born the same year too. So at least our timeline, as far as maybe cultural like influences and stuff, is somewhat
very similar. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So and you got a sister?
Yeah, I have an older sister. Don't you think, like, people born around, like, 78 to 82, they're just, like, this forgotten generation of people? We're not, like, Generation X, and we're not millennials. We're sort of that over-dramatic. We just kind of had to watch both.
That's an amazing point. Yeah. No, when you put it that way, I mean... Yeah, because so my brother was born in 71, so he got all that good 70s stuff.
Yeah,
he was there in the thick of the 70s, and like as a youngster, you know, the Buck Rogers and the fucking whatever, the first Star Wars or whatever cultural reference you can find.
Totally.
And then I guess I don't know. I mean, what did we have, like the early 90s, something like that?
Yeah, I guess we had the early 90s,
like 80s. TV.
We had the Muppets. That was like
sure.
That was a big deal, right? The Muppets. Back to the Future was a really big deal growing up. Michael Jackson was a really big deal growing up too.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. Like all those big 80s superstars like Madonna and Cyndi Lauper. But we're definitely not notable for history books. You know what I mean? It's like it's all about the millennials now, and you know, before it was all about the angst of Generation X, and they're both so whiny, and we're just kind of hanging out and living life.
True. So then, that's great. No, that's very true. But it has its tough side too, to growing up during that time.
I think it is kind of tougher to be that middle child, I suppose. You know, that nobody pays attention to because you kind of become the observer of a lot of things that are going on around you.
Right. I mean, look at a guy like Nick Cave. So you've worked with him, toured with the guy. Like, he's from a generation before us, obviously.
Yeah.
And, I mean, what a different kind of life that guy compared to ours. I mean, it's sort of like they're a million worlds apart. But it's kind of cool, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I mean the fact that he obviously plays like a pretty like important role like in your career, I think, for a chapter of your career at least, that you guys would find yourselves sort of like-minded and share time on the road, and he helped you put a record out and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, he comes from another kind of place altogether. Like, he clearly gravitated to your work for a reason, right? I would think. Like, do you? And I because I'm gonna have to circle back because I want to talk about like high school and shit. But do you remember how he like found your music, or how you two guys like eventually connected? Did he find you? Did he reach out to you?
Wow, that's a really What happened was I met this man named Larry Ratzo-Sloman, who is a writer, and he does biographies for Dylan. He did a biography for Dylan. He did a book on Houdini. He did Scar Tissue. That's Anthony Kiedis' autobiography. And also worked on the Mike Tyson books that came out recently. And I met him outside of a Sly Stone tribute concert that I was doing. I was singing Sly Stone songs. It was like summer.
Here in New York?
Mm-hmm.
What club? So I have some visual context. Do you remember?
What's like the Clinton Castle? Is that what it's called? Like it's some downtown area. It was like outdoors.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm really bad with remembering names of things now, but I'll remember how that. It was like one of the first experiences where they had me just, perform on somebody else's arrangement and stuff.
Right.
It was a really cool experience. And he stopped me after the show, and we were talking outside, and he asked me if I wanted to do his radio show at the KGB bar. And this was like, I feel like it was almost 10 years ago when this happened. And I said, sure, I'll do this. And we did the show and stuff. And I thought I'd never, like every New York experience, you meet someone, they're inspired, or you become fast friends, and then you just never see that person anymore.
Right.
And it turned out his office where he writes, where Ratso writes, was across the street from this denim shop I was working at the time. And we ran into each other on the street, and he was telling me how he was listening to that A Fish Hook an Open Eye, which was the record I had put out at the time.
That was like you self-released that.
Yeah. And he liked it so much, he was going to have his friends, Bob, Lou, and Nick, take a listen to it.
Okay.
And I thought, you know, this dude's kind of old. Maybe, you know, it's his buddies, plays poker with or something like that. I'm like, sure, yeah, Bob, Nick, and Lou, great, man. Like, when are we going to hang out? Whatever. Right. And I didn't realize he was talking about Bob Dylan, Lou Reed, and Nick Cave. And he was giving that, I guess he gave them all a copy of my record, and I think Nick was the only one who liked it. I don't know. But Nick came in with his sons, like a couple months later. He was visiting Ratso, and they all came into the shop I was working at.
Wow.
And I was completely stunned. And Nick Cave pointed to me and was like, look, that's the lady we heard earlier. And I just remember, like, I had a pen in my hand, and it just exploded. And I had all this ink coming down. And all the girls at the shop were going nuts. And they're like, you know, like, I was definitely, like, bottom rank as a salesperson there. And they were just like, oh, my God, and he's here to see Shilpa? You know, it's like, what's going on? Right. It was definitely one of those, like, weird 80s movie moments. And I remember we were talking to each other, but both of us were staring at the floor because we're both not, like, we're both kind of shy initially. Right. So it was just sort of like, oh, okay, yeah. And that's how we started being friends with each other.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So then how did it come about that he would want to do a record with you?
Well, I mean, I toured with Grindr Man for a few dates because their opening act had broken the theremin that they were playing. They had Armin Ra was playing, I think, opening for them. The myth is that I broke his theremin. I did not break.
So that you could get the gig?
Exactly. I saw Grindr Man at in Midtown. I went backstage. We hung out. And apparently the rumor is that I had broken this guy's theremin so I could get on the show. But anyway, the theremin broke, and there was no way of repairing it on time. And so they, I think it was Jim Sclavunos called me up at work, and the Monday after, and it was so rainy, and I was so bummed out because I had to work my stupid job, and I'd just seen Grindr Man play.
Which were an incredible band, too.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just like, here we go again, selling denim. And he called me on the phone, and he was just like, we need somebody to open these shows and from D.C. into Memphis. Can you do it? And I looked at my boss, and I was like, adios, I'm out. I don't care if you fire me. I'm going to do these shows, yeah.
So Jim's an incredible musician, too. I mean,
he's the best.
When I worked at the Knitting Factory, one of my favorite shows that I did there was one time only. It was, I think we did an early and a late show, but it was Teenage Jesus and the Jerk, reunion show with Jim and Thurston Moore and Lydia Lunch and maybe one other person on stage. And I remember Lydia Lunch was like drinking a bottle of Hennessy backstage and shit, which was coming from my hip hop sensibility. I was so impressed. She also
that was my first bottle of alcohol, by the way.
Hennessy.
It was a bottle of Hennessy in my parents' basement.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah,
it's Jersey shit.
She's
right
got
there.
good taste.
Yeah, I can see there is some sort of connection between the two there. I also gotta say that she really impressed me in that, you know, the Knitting Factory was like kind of notorious about having their banner backstage, and she was like, you take that fucking banner down.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd never seen any artist play, much less make a comment about it. Just like, whatever, it's there, you know. But for her to demand that and get it and was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, she's, you know, I love her, you know.
She's amazing. Great, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so then obviously, like, you've been playing shows before the Grindr Man thing too, right? I mean, you're doing your own stuff too.
Yeah.
So had you been performing before you even came to New York?
Well, I was trained in classical Indian music, so I was performing when I was a kid, but not in a band context. And my dad would be like playing pageant dad, and we'd do all these competitions and like classical Indian music.
Wow.
I remember being super young. Like, I started when I was 6 and then kept going until I was 17. It was really intense. Really intense training.
Just like around the tri-state, or were you...
Yeah, my God. And then you'd be showcased like the show pony. Look at what my daughter can do.
Oh, no.
And I hated it. We had to sing in languages I didn't understand. Like, I just couldn't deal at all. But
meaning like that the songs were what it was traditional.
They were in Sanskrit, they were in Hindi, they were like in all different languages, and I grew up speaking Bengali, but not to the point where I could understand a lot of deep things.
Sure,
it was all conversational. And it just wasn't for me. It was a lot of rules and a lot of drilling, and now I look back on it and it's like I can pick up pitch so easily. Right. I don't need instrumentation and really know how to sing something. I could hear something once and I'm like, oh, that's what it's doing. I'll call right back to you. So that was amazing that I picked up that skill from singing like that. But actually doing it as a kid, I mean, I don't know. I wanted to watch movies and hang out with my friends. I didn't want to do any of that kind of stuff. So
what instruments were you playing?
I play the harmonium. I play the piano because my dad thought it was classy if we learned how to play the piano. I was not allowed to play guitar because it's too American. It was too masculine in their eyes.
Right.
But that was always the instrument I wanted to play, of course. But, we did that. I was a dancer for a long time.
Really?
I was like, I studied dance for about the same time, of 11 years of dancing.
Wow. Yeah. Because, my frame of reference for your artwork now is because I've seen you a lot around the stuff that we're doing right now, or in the last year, which seems so far away from that in some regards,
Yeah.
Especially like how you're singing.
Oh, what is that? What is that supposed to mean?
No, I'm not saying not to discredit. You have range. The range is there just from another register, obviously. I mean, you have to learn a lot. It's a lot of screaming and yelling, isn't it? But it works up to it. It's not like it's not like you're screaming and like an intense scream. It's singing, but it's like guttural,
And you need to play that role if you're going to be a lead singer. You have to kind of bend the rules and kind of muddy it up and make it dirty. That's what makes it rock and roll. That's what makes it punk. I've also done a lot of backing vocal work for people, which is way more technical.
Like what? Because I'm not hip to that. Like other people's records?
I've been on session for other people's records before, for my friends' albums and stuff. And also I toured with Nick Cave as a backing singer.
Oh.
And it is a lot of knowing how to phrase something, having to sort of pull your voice up to a point so you're not interfering with the lead singer. And also making the phrasing so it's complementary to what the lead melody is. So it is a lot of technical.
But do you just learn that on the road, on the fly?
No, I actually practice a lot.
Right.
Yeah, if somebody wants me to sing, even doing a duet or something just on a concert, you have to kind of find your area.
Right.
I trained the guys that sing with me now in my band. None of them really knew how to sing, so you have to drill them.
I could probably tell that from hanging out with them now. I realize that y'all don't look like
No, and it takes a lot of work. It's like a lot of practice. You have to repeat vocals a lot before you get it. You can't just know what it is and just think you're gonna ace the exam. It's more like you got to sing while you wash the dishes. You got to sing while I change the sheets. It's to learn somebody else's stuff. Yeah, it's a lot.
So when we did the Video Game Awards and you did this song, which was Maybell, what was her name?
It was Big Maybell.
Yeah.
But Jerry Lee Lewis has a more famous a rendition of it, and it was a whole lot of shaking going on.
Right, but that was kind of like a last minute request, I guess.
Yes, it was a very last minute request.
But with that being said, like, so what was, since you didn't have a ton of time to put that together, how did you do that? Just technically speaking.
Well, I listened to the song, and I found the chords on the keys, because I play by ear a lot, and I broke it down to the most essential chords, which is, it's a 3-chord song. And I just kind of rode those chords and sang it over and over again, so I could not only learn what the melody was, but I could also learn it to the point that I can make it my own.
Right.
Because that's really important.
Kind of bend it towards you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then I showed the guys what I did, and then asked them, well, how about if you change the beat to this so it could accommodate where the lyrics are falling according to my interpretation of it. And then you add the guitar, you add the bass, and there you go. It's done.
Yeah. It worked well in the context of that event, which was like
if I were to play that song again, and this happens with a lot of songs, especially covers or even songs that you write yourself, you start adding even more flourishes to it.
Right, because that was like a first stab at the
super basic. Because I was like, I have this amount of time to do it. I got to make sure I can actually get from point A to point B without messing it up. So you just pick all the rudimentary stuff and just kind of roll with that. And then as you know it, you can kind of add more to it if you want to.
Because it's kind of an interesting, I was just thinking this too, like sort of aside to, I guess, both your shows, but a lot of the records too, because you've done like a handful of covers, like, you did the Prince one, which was dope, and the Lou Reed one, right?
Yeah.
So what are those were just you picking those, and you were like, I always want to do this?
They always come from a very weird place, because it's not like it's never calculated.
Right.
I'll hear something and it's very emotional. I'm either like going through this time period, or something happens and I'm like, I gotta cover this song.
Right.
And I think with all of those songs, it kind of happens by circumstance and not by, I gotta make this song happen just to see if I could do it. It was just more like, I gotta cover this song right now. The Lou Reed cover, we did Makeup. I had just gotten off tour with the Bad Seeds, and I was in Sicily, and I found this place where they sold like Marsala wine for €1, and that's pretty much what works for me. There was this big outdoor party, and Lou Reed had passed away like about a month ago before then, and they played this song, and the one thing I loved about my travels in Italy were that the stray dogs are amazing. They're just so cool. Right. And they always have a strain of like golden retriever. Like there's always like a lab or a retriever hanging out that's a stray. And I'm like, whoever left you,
Yeah.
And one of them came up to me while the song was on and just started moving back and forth. So I did the same thing. Wow. And we just had this moment. I was dancing with a dog. And and it was a Lou Reed song, and I just was like, "This is the one I'm going to cover."
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, that obviously has a very personal attachment to that. That's amazing. That's incredible. I mean, that's why even like with Door Girl, it seems like the more current record, it seems like obviously there's a story there. There's a personal story there. It's quite a literal interpretation of some of your regular life, and I want to get into that, but obviously, like, this is like maybe your fourth album, really, if you kind of add them up. It doesn't, regardless of, I'd love to just even take the record label like sort of aspect out of it, because in a way it kind of forces, I think, both the listener that's listening, maybe our conversation, but how they even like perceive like music. There's like this kind of weird, if you take the industry part out of it and allow it to the music itself to sort of exist only as what it is, with like it's just like a blank, like a record with no information or whatever, then I guess you can kind of hear it a little less obstruction about like what it looks like, or it's like a CDR or some shit like that. It's kind of distracting in some subliminal, like psychological way. Not to like go on some weird tangent about that, but because if you think, because that's what I mean, it was informed by your this job of yours too, right?
Yeah, totally.
You want to feel like talking about that?
Do I ever?
We don't. I mean, we.
No, yeah, we could totally talk about that. I just, in my mind, just realized nodding my head doesn't translate well on a podcast. You know,
No.
and that's making me laugh, but because I keep nodding my head. Yeah, I've worked the door at pianos for 8 years now. I tend to keep jobs for a long time. I think I need something steady.
Right.
Because I am, by nature, a very chaotic person. I have a very chaotic mind.
Okay.
So I need something to kind of hold it down. So I tend to keep jobs for a very long time.
You can come and go from a job like that.
Yeah, they're super supportive. They're really supportive about me touring and stuff. They've never have ever given me a hard time about it, which is amazing. I really like the people that work there, and I think everybody's in it for the same reasons. Most of the people I work with are artists and musicians.
Do you find yourself in the front, like on the street, or are you in the back?
I'm in the back of the room.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the back of the room. They have the big guys out in the front.
Big guys are up front.
And then there's also a lady. Her name is Shoshana, and she also works in the front. And she's hard. She's a tough broad.
Yeah.
And then they have me inside, and I work with another bouncer, and I collect the money, but I also have to make sure that the line is operating okay. And I tend to yell and scream at people a lot.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Huh. Yeah.
I think I mentioned this before. I was hired for the job because I was allowed. That's why they got me to work there.
Like they sourced you out for that?
Yeah, but they've known me for a while because my band used to play there, like
Right.
in the mid 2000s. They were like, "Do you need a job?" And I was like, "Yes, I do."
What is it like? I mean, that, you know, as a musician too, like, and when you're that close to the door, I know the makeup of that room. You're not that far from the stage, obviously.
No.
You know, so you're like kind of inundated with bands every night too, in a way, and like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's talk about like, you know, absorbing like that kind of, it's like not method acting, but I guess like, you know, you're fully immersed in it. It's not like, oh yeah, I go on tour, so like I see like the door girl, I guess, quote unquote, like, and this is my like projection of what it might be like to like have that job, you know, like it's kind of like my boho like representation of, you know, but it's very quite like, you know, a literal thing. You know?
Yeah, it is. I work as a door girl. I've always worked a job on the side. I've never just done music. It kind of puts you in your place. I mean, I've always worked in the service industry too.
Right.
Which is also like you could pick up so much writing material because you're dealing with people all the time.
Oh yeah.
So it's good for that. But I love the contrast. I mean, there was a time, I remember I got asked to sing with Andrew Bird at Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
Which is like, I never thought in a million years I would ever be able to like be on stage at Carnegie Hall. That's wild to me, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing.
It was like a crazy moment.
Yeah.
And then I remember having to work the door the next day, and I had to throw some 22-year-old kid out for calling me a bitch and trying to cause trouble. And I just remember how strange that was, the two different sides of my life.
I just played Carnegie Hall last time.
I know. Now I got to throw your ass out, yeah, for being a drunken asshole. And that's always kind of. I like that. I like the reminder of it. Right. I like the contrast of it. I like how New York that is.
It sure is.
Because nobody in New York gives a shit about your achievements. It doesn't matter how much, what you think you just made or what you did. If you're walking down the street and it's rush hour, no one gives a shit. They just need to get to where they're going. Yeah. They need to get to their job. They don't have time to, prop you up. And I like that. I think that's a really cool way to be.
Yeah. Well, now you haven't lived anywhere else, right? In your adult life. Right?
No. I've lived in New York I think I'm on year 18 at this point. So yeah, it's been a really long time.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes I think of, because I lived in California for a little while, but I'm from the East Coast, and I've been here now for on to 15-ish, and it's a humbling, obviously very humbling place, especially for people like us that are like sort of we can make a tiny bit of money like doing music and then have to have to work very hard to make that money too, so you're constantly humbled, and you're out late a lot and amidst a certain kind of like environment. There's nothing really like it. It doesn't translate like in LA or in Chicago or in London or whatever like that, these other major hubs, I guess, for this kind of community. So, and your music to me feels very, especially this last record too, just it does feel very like late at night in New York, and it's aggressive and there's some angst,
Oh yeah. there's a lot of angst for sure.
So then now, but this is all you like on. Obviously, you have some musicians that played on the record, right?
Yeah.
But when I first kind of knew about your music, I think probably like a fair share of people maybe got introduced to your music because you had a band, right? So you had the Happy Hookers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in a band format. I started out as a solo artist, and I would go to the open mics at Sidewalk Cafe, and that's how I learned how to write songs, basically.
You remember like your first time?
Yeah, I walked in, and there was like an army of people with guitars, and I was like, I don't belong here. And I just came in, I had no instrument, and I still I don't know what made me put my name in the hat. But I don't regret it, because I just got up and I sang something a cappella that I'd written. And Latch was running the night at the time, came up to me, and he's like, if you come by next week and bring an instrument with you, I'm going to give you a show. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I've never played a show before, this is going to be crazy in this level,
Right.
And what did I have on me? I had a beat up harmonium, and I just brought this harmonium and played it and sang, and sure enough, he gave me a 30-minute set. That was the first time I ever had to play a set. I did not have enough songs. I had to write to fill this 30-minute setup, and it just kind of took off from there. It just kept going,
Wow. So for people that might not know like what a harmonium is, like how do you even play that?
It's a bellows instrument, so it's very similar to an accordion or a concertina. It has a very similar vibe to that.
But you play it like sitting down, like at a table. That's how it's meant to be played. Right?
It operates on reeds, and it's wind power, but it's also a reed instrument at the same time.
What do you mean by a reed instrument? Because that's just like a clarinet, right? Am I like?
No,
that's a wood. Wait,
it's like several.
I apologize.
It's like several different reeds.
Yes. Apologies.
There's like a lot of different wooden reeds on the inside. Right. I don't know if an accordion runs on reeds or not. I think it's just
it's all air. Right?
All air. I'm not sure.
Can you play an accordion?
Yeah, I'm really bad at it because it's very heavy.
Yeah.
And you have to have a very, very strong back to play an accordion. It's like out of control.
And that's the only way you can play it is up, like hanging off your shoulders, right?
And especially if you want to do full size. And, I could kind of maneuver around the chords, and then you have those buttons on the side. I don't know what they're called, but they're all the other chords you can play against it. Right. And I think it's just, to drone against what you're playing.
Right.
It's not easy because it's even more physical than playing a harmonium. It's just, you have to use all of your back muscles for that.
But that's something you picked up a long time ago. Right?
Playing the harmonium. Yeah. I had to play it because that's what you play accompanying vocal music in Indian music, especially North Indian classical music.
Okay.
You do that. Yeah.
And that would be you when you would do that as a child or whatever. Like that would be you alone on stage, just that with no accompaniment, or would it be with like an ensemble of some kind? Or
no, they make you play that stuff by yourself at first until you can even join an ensemble. So I never joined an ensemble. A lot of people do. There's also people who just play harmonium, and they do that. You can see that a lot in like Qawwali music and stuff like that. Cool. It's like that.
Do you have like personal? Do you like listen to that?
I love it.
So what would be some like? Who do you like in that artist wise? Or is there like a period of time because and forgive me and anyone that might be listening too, because there's obviously people have different serious depths of like music knowledge and especially when they venture all over the world and stuff like that. So my frame of reference, at least for actual artists, is very low. So I'm just curious too. Like
the most famous one is Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. He's the most famous, I think, in modern times for Qawwali. I couldn't name any because I just remember like having those records, and there would be like Ustad something Khan. There were a lot of Khans in there for sure, which is like a very common title for a lot of Pakistani or I don't know if this even translates to Afghani, but Indian and Pakistani Muslims. They have a lot. There's a lot of last names that are Khans and stuff. And even though I was born and raised Hindu, my parents would take us out, which is still part of the culture. I mean, it's the same instrumentation, and we watch these functions happen. It would always happen in some high school in like some town in New Jersey or something like that, and you'd watch these people just do that, or you'd watch an ensemble with a professional harmonium player, and there would be a singer who would sing independently of that, or the singer would be on an instrument called a tambura, which is also a drone instrument, while there's a harmonium player, a tabla player. Sometimes they'll stick a sarod or something in there too. But that's how those bands are constructed.
Right.
I would have to refresh my memory on that. There was just so many of these vinyls that my dad had of classical Indian stuff.
So he was really into it. I mean, he was...
Yeah, definitely. He always wanted to be a singer, but then had to have a real job. And
right. Did he sing at home?
Yeah, that's how, I think that's how I got a voice, was through my dad.
Does he check for your new shit?
No. Not at all.
Have your parents ever come to a show?
No.
Not once?
Never. I don't think they ever will either.
Not even if we book one in Nutley, New Jersey or something? I don't know if that's close.
They would hate it. Well, they live in California now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well...
So that's too far.
It is, and you were just there, so they didn't show.
No. I don't think it. No, my parents would never come out to a show.
It's just because it's too rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bar. My parents don't drink, so there's a bar, and there's all these crazy loud people around, and it's also music they don't like.
Right.
So why would they come watch me do that?
I know. I get it. Trust me, I understand. I've experienced. So then the your contemporary work, your music and stuff, then obviously it must have even that much more of like a personal kind of thing, because it's like you're sort of on your own, right? Like
yeah. I
mean, you write those songs by yourself too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of time spent alone for sure.
Do you write other stuff that's like not music stuff?
Yeah, I do. I like to do that. I kind of like to write all the time, to be honest. I keep journals and things like that just in case I forget my thoughts or what I'm thinking about, because that always helps. And I'm always like sort of have my hands in something.
You do it at work?
Yeah, I've written on many of scrap pieces of paper, or when I'm supposed to tally your band, how many people they brought in. There's also a couple of notes happening in the bottom.
People say some things, like that are pretty priceless in that moment.
Oh my God, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. But I think writing is something that's very important for me. I always wished I was a visual artist, but I was never very good at it. It was never a complete thing for me where I could just have my own vision to the point that I'm in complete control of the medium.
Right.
I can draw somebody a picture of a cow and it'll look like a cow, but it's not like, you know what I mean? It's not my own thing. Because I know a lot of visual artists, and I'm like, wow, how did you even come up with that?
Yeah, but I mean, a drawing of a cow, it's your own thing if you made it, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
It's your interpretation of that,
Yeah.
Do you have a bunch of those?
Drawings of cows?
Not just just drawings in general?
Yeah.
Oh, you should use them somehow.
I have, actually. The cover of A Fishhook and Open Eye was a drawing that I did that they just stuck on the cover because there was nobody, I didn't have enough money to pay somebody else to do the album artwork, so I ended up doing it myself, and it looks very amateur, but it's like, that's just my hand and how I draw, and it's all freehand.
So how do you get to that point of like doing an album? Because if you go from like playing like, you know, an open mic at the Sidewalk Cafe, and then like you build from one gig to another, then like there's a couple of years between there before you put that album out, right?
Yes, that's very true.
Were you going? You must have been going out too and like seeing shows and bands.
All the time. I mean, I started going out to see bands when I went to college because I used to sneak out of the house a lot and go to these hardcore shows at the Arts Council in Princeton because that was the only thing you could do when you were underage.
Did you ever go to the Terrace F Hall?
In Princeton? The Eating Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have gone there.
Did you play there?
I've never played there, no.
They used to book a lot of shows there.
No, it's so funny. I get no love from my hometown, but I also really didn't like growing up around there. Right. I didn't like Princeton at all. I thought it was a terrible place to go to high school.
Right.
I mean, the college kids call you townies, but everybody's like super rich, so who are they calling townies? I mean, it was just a weird mentality. It was very classist and obnoxious there.
Yeah.
But they had the Princeton Record Exchange.
Of course.
And
still is there.
That really, I spent all of my babysitting money on records when I was a teenager. Yeah, totally. That was the place to go. But other than that, I thought I didn't really like anyone there, and it didn't fit in at all. So
if you were going to hardcore shows, then were you like buying hardcore records too, and like New York punk records, or what was your?
You know, it was a very odd thing because I was a goth kid in high school, but you didn't really get a lot of goth shows you could go to when you were like 14, 15 years old. Because,
no, I don't think so.
No, so you had this thing that they would do at the Arts Council, and it was all ages, and you could go, and I would lie to my parents and tell them I was going to the library across the street. And then in the bathroom of the library, I'd put on my black lipstick and change my clothes. And the whole 9 yards, and look like a freak. And I'd walk into this hardcore show, and they would all look at me and be like, "Well, I didn't know vampires came out in the daytime," because they hated the goth. Hardcore kids and goth kids did not get along at all. Right. And it was just something to do. You know,
there's also probably not a lot of women at hardcore shows too, right? I mean, it's
no,
very
there were tons of girls.
Were there?
Yes, there were.
Oh, cool.
I think women really did want to participate in that scene, and it just wasn't built for them for some odd reason. It was just so hard to get. It's like a boys' club. Total boys' club. So you have to be the girlfriend or something of somebody. You know what I mean? And that was not fun. That part. I hated that part because I knew I could sing better than most of the singers up there, and I knew I could pull more volume out of my voice than what they were doing. I mean, they were singing, well, they were screaming incorrectly, which is what I picked up as a teenager. So I was like, "You're going to lose your voice in a week, you'll see." But
so how would you constitute that?
Well, I wasn't. I mean, I remember some guy coming over to me when I was in high school and wouldn't let me join his band, but really wanted me to give up my harmonium because he wanted to play it. And it was that kind of chauvinism that was there. So I just thought, I would never talk to anybody about joining bands because it was just ridiculous to get in there.
But I'm interested in how do you scream incorrectly?
The screaming incorrectly.
How can you? I mean, obviously you can tell when someone's like shrieking in the mic.
Yeah. Don't scream from your face. That's the worst thing you can do to yourself.
So like right here, like in your jaw or whatever.
In your jaw and in your throat. You can't do that. You have to pull the air out of your diaphragm. Right. And you have to use your nasal cavities.
Oh yeah.
And then it has to be it has to almost come out like a hook. Right. And then get out of your mouth that way.
Can you do what was it that like Dizzy Gillespie and like some of these guys could do where it was like
circular breathing?
Yeah, can you do that?
No.
That's more for like
that's horn players.
That's horn players.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know, to carry a very long note, I don't know if they'd apply the same science.
No, well, Sinatra could do circular breathing, which is why you can never hear him breathing when he's singing.
Right.
It's all runs and these very fluid phrases. He's hands down. He makes it look so easy, but Definitely. He is an incredible singer.
Right.
Incredible
Absolutely.
Singer. No, the technique that they show most singers is the open rib cage. Okay. You have to open your rib cage up so your body's aligned and your diaphragm's open, and you have to pull like air from your pelvis up to the chest and then out. And that's really hard to do. It's a really, really tough thing to do. And you can lose that skill very easily.
You have to be standing too, right?
Yes.
Because I see how you do your show too. It's partially seated and then standing and then you go back and forth. Obviously you have to be seated, I guess, to play the harmonium too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to play the keys, I'm seated because I get more leverage from how my elbows are bent, so I'm not playing like Frankenstein.
Right.
And then with harmonium, I play standing up because I like playing standing up on harmonium. But you can sit down on harmonium too if you want. But it's kind of depends on how you throw and move your body, you know.
Right.
I always wonder how musicians can play standing still, and not moving.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
Yeah. Any instrument. Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of guitar, especially if you're playing like a guitar or something, something that's hanging off your body. Like, I would feel I would feel like I'd have to be like, pacing around and, but.
Yeah, but whatever works. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're a bad player because you're not moving. It just means that's how you play,
Right. So when you were playing I'm just kind of fascinated about when you made that kind of switch over from like, the kind of traditional stuff that you were maybe perhaps pushed into as a child as far as playing and into like what you actually wanted to be doing, or I guess what you would eventually like evolve into. Like, so did you play anything at all, any shows like that in high school at all? Like,
no, I didn't.
It wasn't until you came to New York City, right?
It wasn't until I came to New York City. I mean, even when I was going to school in Philadelphia, it was the same thing at the time where girls were the groupie or the girlfriends, and you have to listen to a bunch of boys talk at you the entire time about things you knew already.
Oh my God, I can only imagine. Listen, as a man, I can see my perspective, but I've done enough shows of enough genres of music and especially like when I lived in California, a lot of like DIY kind of punk shows where you would see that very common trope.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's so hilarious.
It is, but I think that's part of the peacocking. I think peacocking is part of a male thing, and the more they appear to know, they think the more attractive it looks to a woman. I think that's just. I don't know if that's what it is, or I mean that's just from my point of view. But I mean,
especially when it comes to like talking about bands.
Oh yeah, of course, and you have to kind of name everything. It's got to be categorized in a specific way, and I mean, it's a very uptight sort of thing you have to do. But yeah, I've been collecting records since I was very young, and I had to kind of give up on doing that from touring because I couldn't keep moving my stuff, and like I kept losing things because of touring. Because I would sublet my apartment a lot, so I just stopped collecting records. But women do listen to a lot of music, and they do know what they're talking about. But
of course, absolutely. Absolutely. Honestly,
we just don't go about it the same way, I don't think. But yeah, it's...
No, I think it's different. I think that men tend to become more like obsessed with just the collecting aspect of it, the accumulation and like the finding of things, and it's like you can probably track it back to anyone's childhood where
it used to be the stamp collection and now it's the record collection.
Where I think for women, and it's probably why some women have these like a little more streamlined collections and stuff to a certain degree, and listen, it's different for everybody obviously, but they're perhaps a slight one tick or two more sentimental with their choices and stuff, where it's a little less about like being a completist, you know, like every pressing, mono pressings of my Thin Lizzy collection.
I think some women are kind of like that too.
Of course.
But I mean, till this day, I've run into this thing like, I didn't know you knew about this certain band. I'm like, I've known about that record for a long time, and people would just be so surprised that I knew about something that they just discovered, especially if it's coming from a guy. But I just find it funny because when I am around a lot of guys, I don't interject my tastes in stuff that much because I'm also interested in hearing what other people are listening to.
Sure. Hearing them just rattle on. Play themselves. So you had another band though too before you did the Happy Hookers thing, right?
Yeah, I had a band called Beat the Devil. It was my pseudonym at Sidewalk Cafe, so it was something I went by.
So that's what it started as that.
Yeah, it started as that, and then I decided one day to get a drummer and a bass player, and it completely imploded. I did not know how to run a band, and I didn't know how to steer other musicians, and of course I was working with dudes, and they took advantage of the fact that I didn't quite have a grasp on that kind of stuff.
And so in what way? Like as far as like...
It's just a lot of strong-arming, a lot of playing like politics, and it was just funny to me looking back because we were all so young, and nothing was really that important. We weren't making any money, you know. I did it because I got into music because I thought it was going to be fun.
Right.
And I definitely got into a situation with that where they just stripped the fun out and made it all business. They started looking at me as a commodity. Oh, she's got that voice.
Right.
But now we have to make sure she just keeps, you know, making money for us. And that was the mentality with them. And, you know, it was a really hard position to be in. And I definitely dismantled it after a couple years because I was so miserable.
Really?
Being there, yeah. I really hated that band after a while.
It was like what was the analogy that was used before? It was like a golden goose.
Yeah, the goose that laid the golden egg. Yeah. Oh, she's got a voice. I see money. And it was just like, that's all it was. It just became somebody else's meal ticket or a prospective meal ticket.
Right. And which would kind of, you know, and I mean, I don't know if that's what applied with the following group too, but I mean, obviously it's hard when you sort of start as a soloist and you kind of, it seems like you are doing your own thing, you know, by yourself since your childhood, essentially, you know. So you've already got this like lone wolf thing going on. If I may be as bold as to say that, I don't know if that's accurate.
No, I don't think it's bold at all. It's very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, so every band has been, it's like with dudes behind you too, right? Yeah. Have you ever had other women in the group?
I've worked with other women. I work with a sax player, Nikki D'Agostino, I think is amazing. She plays with a lot of different bands too. I've worked with a lot of female vocalists.
But as far as your primary bands,
stuff, you know, I have to be honest, it doesn't come up as easily. I think it will, though. I think we're going to hit an age where there's going to be so many bass players, guitar players, drummers that are women, you know. Right. It's more encouraged now.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and there is a question of just simply like availability. And
exactly.
And New York is a tricky place because there's a lot of working musicians here too.
Well, also the new thing of how to operate a band is to do it how the old school jazz cats used to do it back in the day. So now it's like, I'm the band leader. I'm going to pick who I want on this record, and I'm going to pick who I want to tour with me. So I don't have the same people on everything all the time. And that's how I've chosen to run it, and it's the easiest way to do it.
Right.
I don't have to like commit to anybody touring with me for long periods of time, and that is a relief on the player because it's hard to tour like that. It's not easy for everybody to tour all the time, and it's also easier for me because I don't have to be attached to somebody being there all the time. Yeah,
sure. No, that's a cool way to do it. I mean, and like you gotta, I guess the goal is to continue being able to do it too, right? I mean, like...
Exactly. And if I'm doing like 80 80 to 90% of the arranging and stuff. It's like not hard to just pick up somebody and be like, this is how you're supposed to play this, you know?
Right.
And that makes things easier too. So I do come from a place where at this point, I'm handling the majority of like what's going on while playing is happening.
Right.
So I don't have to depend on somebody writing parts or writing structural things at all. So
do you write your videos too?
Some of them, yes, and some of them, no.
Who's the one where the guy gets stomped on?
Oh, with the Liberation Labia, that one?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the song again?
It's Nocturnal Emissions. Right? Yeah. That one I wrote, yeah. Anything that's crazy and elaborate is something that I probably did, because my brain, it just runs to these play-like.
I love sending that to promoters. Yeah. So that's one of my go-to links.
I'm starting to believe in the simple idea, because these productions are starting. They're a lot of work and they cost a lot of money. So you can definitely make a video much cheaper than that.
Right.
Yeah, but I like doing stuff like that. I think that stuff is a lot of fun. But yeah, I do like to write little scripts here and there and make stories out of things.
Well, there's not enough stuff that's like dudes getting like kind of like their ass kicked. You know? I think so. I like that one. It just was nice to see, not in like this sort of pseudo like reverse sex, male on male sexism thing. You know,
it was during the Todd Aiken thing where he was telling us to shut down our bodies. He was telling women to shut their bodies down.
It was a response to that.
It was definitely a response to that. You know, I think we live in some crazy times.
Yes,
we
true.
We definitely do, and I think a lot of good is going to come out of it, and a lot of bad is going to come out of it too. But I like to tell stories. I like telling stories from a female perspective too, because you don't get a lot of characters that way.
No.
And people constantly, you know, pigeonhole you into, are you a feminist writer, you're this kind of writer. I don't think it's that. It's just I didn't want the female character to be reduced to how Jack White would see it, because he has a certain way of writing a female character into his songs. And I know he's a huge champion of female musicians, so I'm not trying to knock that with him, but I just never wanted to hear another song again about women listening to their mothers. I wanted something more. I was like, I know you're trying to do good. Man, but I don't want to hear another song like that. I want something that really, really has a much more completed thought about a female character.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, in the context of, like, say, the music industry, from a writing standpoint of female characters, if you will, quote-unquote characters, it's like real people that work in the music industry that might not necessarily be art performers, but also performers are included in this, that it's a very important to have someone writing about that, to document that, regardless of whether it's fictionalized or more of like a documentarian style, because obviously it's without question undoubtedly overloaded with men, and I mean, in both, especially behind the scenes. I mean, forget about it.
What was cool about those videos too. Like the crew was dominantly female.
Well, that's amazing. That's great.
And it's like I'm talking camera operators. You know, people doing the technical work as well. The editor is both times I did a video, which was written off from scripts for me, was two female editors. The director of photography was women. You know, like things like that. And that stuff is really
that's
important.
essential. Yeah.
Because
even going back to Door Girl, that story is not really one that's been, if it's been told, and I could be very wrong here too, just because I don't know every single story like that's been told. But I would say 6 times out of 10, it's probably a man writing for the woman's perspective. You know, if it's writing about a character of a woman that's working as a door girl or something like that.
Yes.
I could be wrong, and this is all totally speculative, so I just want to preface that by saying...
Oh, I mean, and they would make her, like in her early 20s,
Right.
Well,
and, which is kind of...
Yeah.
That's a good question. Now, on average in New York City, the women that are working the door at a club, I would be genuinely curious, like, what's the age spread? Is it closer to the early 20s, or is it more in their 30s? Or
it's really varied.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you've met, I can't remember her name, but she's amazing. She's kind of like the door goddess of Mercury Lounge.
Oh, yeah. That woman that works at Yes.
She's definitely not in her 20s, just like I'm not in my 20s.
Right,
it's not meant as an offensive thing.
No.
I think what's missing from a lot of the New York narrative or narrative of being an artist is I'm really tired of hearing stories about people in their 20s. I think it's time to hear stories about people in their 30s and their 40s, because we're going through a time where we're seeing that there are artists still working menial jobs and still making art.
Right.
And that's how you have to do it. And you're not, like, just fresh out of college.
Right.
Trying things out.
Definitely. That's a very important point, too, because a lot of those narratives might even be written by people that are new and young in the writing industry, in the TV industry, too, I think. Like, and it might be perceived, perhaps, by executives that, like, people that are pushing 40 that have those jobs, it's like, who would watch that, But I think or who would read it or watch it. I think it's kind of a universal thing, whether you're 18 or like in your late 40s, that especially in New York City, where it's hard to get a job, and it's hard to keep a job and make money. Not everybody is like a fucking works at Goldman Sachs, and is an entrepreneur, and
exactly.
There's a lot of people that don't have 9-to-5 jobs that either work from home or have multiple jobs.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of going off a little bit, but there's something there that hasn't been explored.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's a big world.
I think so, too. And I think, you definitely need... That's why having diverse hiring practices are good, because those stories come to light. If you have to hire the same type of people to write things or to work on things, you're just going to get that one story all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it is important to have, like, that's how things get really interesting. I mean, I don't know. Well, do you think a movie like Taxi Driver could even be made now? Everyone's so grisly looking in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's like something that's not coveted in film or TV anymore. You have to be very pretty to be on the screen.
Oh, no.
For guys and girls.
Instead we get Baby Driver or whatever that was.
I know.
I was so upset with that.
Could you imagine, like, Taxi Driver being, like, played by Zac Efron or something? They would have to draw the bags under his eyes. I don't,
Unfortunately, I could now, in 2018, I could see that movie.
Oh, and it'd be terrible.
The reboot with Zac Efron.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God. No, it'd be awful. It'd be absolutely awful. No, yeah, well, that era has... What's funny is that it's not like in real life it hasn't totally disappeared, but I think in in storytelling, the people who are responsible for buying and selling those, they're afraid to get invested in that, I think.
Yeah, they are, but they have to understand that their audience really doesn't connect with it either. It's like it's become laughable. I mean, when you think about all the stuff that was huge with a lot of people, like Breaking Bad, you had some middle-aged people in there. They somehow got by, and that was a hit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you dig a little bit, you can find some. So, have you started writing like another record, or do you think about that like far in advance, or do you just like get... because you sort of do it all as one broader kind of narrative in a way, if that's the right way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a while to really. It takes a while to get it going.
Sure.
I always have ideas stewing in my head, but I just talked about this earlier today. There's something within albums, the one song that's the linchpin, There's
Right.
always that one song that gets the rest of the record going. It's like once you can conquer that one song off the record, you might write like one or two beforehand, but then you get the one that gets the ideas just coming out of you. And to get there is really hard.
Sure. So for Door Girl, did it start with one and then you built around it? Or was it like, did you have a couple loose ideas that sort of were, that bookended the thing, or what?
I always knew I wanted to make a record about where I worked because there was just so much to say.
Right.
And when I started this album, I was about 2 songs in and then had tour for the album before, so my brain was just not focused enough, you know?
Right.
And then wrote a couple more songs, and then when I wrote EMT was when the rest of it came out. That was the song that really kind of tied it together for me. So, and you can kind of tell when you listen to it, like when that song comes up, all of a sudden everybody has like a revelation about, oh, that's what the record is about, you know?
So you did this thing today. We could talk about it. I'd like to talk about it. It was just because I wanted to wait until you described it for me. But so you went like to this, to a class, right?
Yeah.
But it was like a girls' school?
It was an all-girls school. It's
like a prep school?
I don't think I think it's like a specialized school. It's not a prep school.
Right.
It was super diverse.
Oh, cool.
I definitely didn't. It was the Nightingale Bamford School, but I don't know what the background story is behind that at all. But the class I entered was like, it was really diverse, which I was really happy to see.
It's like high school?
It was middle school.
Cool.
And there were middle school aged girls. So it was like 5th, 6th grade. It was around there. And I was really intimidated when I read that at first. Like, that was who I was supposed to talk to.
Sure.
Because when you're that age, you can get kind of crazy.
What are they, 11? What are they, 11?
Yeah,
12?
around 11. Like, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Being 11.
Being 11 in Lady World is also a wild time. But they were so cool. And they were all in this music class, and they were doing a curriculum on rock and roll songwriting. And
cool.
So they asked me to come in and talk to them and play some songs and also help them write a rock song. But they had one ready to go, and I have to say, the lyrics were amazing. I had the experience of having to watch the Grammys at work the night before, closed captioned. So
really?
I read everyone's bad lyrics. Yeah, people write really bad lyrics. And walking into the classroom and being introduced to their song, which I don't want to give away because I don't know if that's something special that they want to keep.
Sure.
I was just blown away by how good these lyrics were, and I'm like, there's a whole machine behind these Grammy winners that write these songs, and the lyrics are just terrible.
Yeah.
They don't say anything,
right.
you know? And these 11-year-old girls who write better lyrics than that.
Oh, so the class had written the lyrics.
Together.
Cool. And you sort of helped them help structure it or something?
Well, I didn't need to because they had a great verse, like verse, chorus, and then the bridge, and then, the chorus again. And there's just a nice structure to the song. The only thing I had to point out was that they needed a backbeat, because if it's rock and roll, you need a backbeat and you need 4 to the floor. So the beat was off. So that was the only thing that I noticed. But everything else was spot on.
And they were, like, into having you and stuff?
Yeah, they were super excited.
Did they ask questions?
Lots of questions.
Oh, cool.
Lots of questions because apparently they saw some of my videos. So they well, we kept it as age appropriate as possible. It was really wild discussing concepts and art and music that I just didn't know what territory to cover, because some of it's very gray, and I didn't want to depress anybody, and it can get pretty serious.
For some of that stuff, like emotional.
You got to keep it light. Yeah, you got to keep it light. But no, I was very surprised at how responsive they were to me and to their teachers as well. And
cool.
It was a very, very, very cool experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's neat, like, to see sort of even what you've just done, like, since we started the new year too. It's kind of like a weird mix of very each thing has been quite different as far as these like shows have been going.
Yeah.
So it's leading to something, because, I think there's a lot more people that need to hear your record. They need to hear Door Girl, particularly, because it's a great piece of work,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And it's a great story that I think kind of like, it's kind of pretty, like, even though it's a New York thing, it's pretty universal, too.
I feel the same way. I mean, I don't want the whole New York theme to put people off. I'm definitely not trying to shove a lifestyle down someone's throat,
Yeah.
I think what I was trying to say was something about, how modern life is,
Yeah.
Whether you're living in a different city or even not in a city at all, you still have to work for a living and pay bills, and you have this other part of yourself that's not involved with that, and you have to balance the two. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you did. I think you hit the mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just appreciate your time. You coming here and
thanks.
So,
yeah, this is fun conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
That was so great. Thank you so much to Shilpa Ray for taking the time, come through and be on the Houseless podcast. My name is Peter Agustin, host and producer of the show. Again, if this is your first time ever checking us out, thank you so much for taking some time and listening. Please subscribe. Find us on SoundCloud. You can follow us at Twitter for more updates, of course, at Houseless Pod. SoundCloud is the Houseless Podcast. Otherwise, check us out on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play. Obviously, if you're listening to it already, then you know one way or another to find it. So, thanks so much. Every episode is edited and engineered by CJ Stewart. Make sure you check out Shilpa's most recent album, Door Girl. Many more releases to come in the future. And thank you so much. Until the next episode, thank you again and again and again. This is our 70th episode of the show. And we got 70 more to come. All right, y'all. Take care. Peace, y'all. I'm out of here. All right.